What's up, Carell? So, guys, today I'm going to have special guest on. We're having Carell from Stand Strength. He was kind enough to have me on his channel basically a week or two ago. So I figured I'd have him on my channel here. We talked a lot about hypertrophy last time. He is a power builder and he knows a lot about strength. He knows a lot about hypertrophy too. But other than that, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Carell from standstrength.com and StandStrength, the YouTube channel. So yes, I do focus on a mix of strength training and hypertrophy training, bodybuilding training, partly just because it's my preference. And oftentimes we hear advice catered to being optimal for this or optimal for that, but sometimes we forget to optimize things for what we actually like and what we actually enjoy. And that's why I made my channel.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess let's get right into it. So I got a couple notes here on some topics. The first one we're going to talk about, so progressive overload, and we're going to get into some of the weight, cause versus effect, sets, reps, form, rest time. So what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, so progressive overload, like we all know we need it, like it's been hammered to death, but the thing is the biggest like crime committed by, I would say, like the strength community was this promise that you just need to add 5 pounds every week, add 5 pounds every session. Like that works really, really well when you're a novice, and it continues to work well if you're gifted. But then there's two things: either you're not gifted and it's going to stop working for you, or you're going to stop being a novice and then it stops working for you. And then what do you end up doing? You just keep spinning your wheels, keep trying to find a different program that does linear periodization and this linear type of progression a little bit differently. And then you do that for a couple of years, find that you're still, barely an intermediate. And then after all that time, you just think to yourself, maybe getting big, getting strong isn't for me. And that's one of the worst things that kind of happens is when we make these promises to people saying, yeah, just keep adding weight and you'll get big. And then let's say they do it successfully, but they're not as big as they thought they'd be. Then they get disappointed and they think that they just wasted their time. And one thing I want to talk about later is when you're training consistently, I don't want people to think that there is such a thing as a waste of time. Like, I think that we need to kind of get out of this thinking of it's either a good workout or it's like suboptimal, I should have done something else. Like, no, what you should do is keep going to the gym. But anyway, when it comes to like your weights, you can't just progress session to session. You can't just progress week to week, especially in the long run. And especially if you're trying to pursue hypertrophy goals. Like for people solely like trying to get for strength, I've seen it work really well, really, really well, but it's not something I feel comfortable like recommending off the bat because it's something that didn't work for me. I'm not gifted by any means. Every pound that I added to the bar, I did through a lot of hard work. I did through a lot of reps because that's what I had to do. Linear progression stopped working very, very quickly for me. And I had to rely on the other methods that I feel like we're just kind of forgetting when it comes to progressive overload.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously that's a very good point about the linear progression and everything. And obviously one of the biggest recurring themes on my channel is that linear progression isn't something that you can constantly chase. I think something you brought up is the adding 5 pounds to every week. And like, yeah, I mean, it's good for novices, but at the same time, what happens when you can't add 5 pounds? And that's something that people don't talk about in the fitness industry. Like when I was a novice, early intermediate lifter, one of the problems that I ran into was like, okay, so I stalled out on adding 5 pounds to my bench. Am I getting smaller because I'm not adding weight? Am I still getting bigger or am I just staying the same? And a lot of people made it sound like I was either like at best maintaining where I was at, or I was just losing progress because I wasn't actively adding weight to the bar. So that led me to go down a path of, like we talked about last time, changing up my form a little bit, widening my grip on bench, doing more of an arch, learning leg drive, bouncing it a little bit. And you slowly fall into these bad habits that slowly let you keep progressing artificially and not necessarily sticking to the fundamentals of hypertrophy. Because one thing that I think is important is overall consistency with your form and everything. The problem that we run into with that is it's hard to notice necessarily changes that you make because you have to add 5 pounds every time and it's an arbitrary weight increment. So let's say you do get a lot better at a 225 bench. Let's say maybe it takes you 5 weeks to go up to 230. Like what if you get from 225 and now you can do 226? You can't add half pound plates, or at least 99% of gyms don't have half pound plates. then you have to get to 227, 228, et cetera, until you finally can actually go up to 230. So those are some brief thoughts of mine on progressive overload, linear periodization, and everything. But yeah, I guess.
Yeah. And then one thing I want to kind of add with that is like one thing that I do personally, like when I train my clients in person, like when they're first starting out, part of the reason why we add 5 pounds every week is because you have to remember, like, what's our starting point? More often than not, I'm starting them with the empty bar the first session. So it's like, I'm not adding 5 pounds because, oh, you're 5 pounds stronger. It's just like, okay, you're more confident now. Let's start adding a little bit of weight. Like for me, like whenever I start training my clients in person, there's always this gap between like where you're going to be with the barbell, where you should be at least, and when you're first starting out. Because when you're first starting out, I mainly put you on calisthenics, dumbbells, and machine work, just because like I know like what I've met many novices who you put them on a machine and they still manage to get the form wrong. So it's kind of important. And then like if you then ask them, okay, I want you to do this with a barbell, most of the time their hinge, like out of the bench press, their squat, and their hinge, it's probably just going to be atrocious. At least maybe one of them is going to be good, but it's very, very rare for me to meet someone who is like good at all three right off the bat. So part of the reason why I'm adding that 5 pounds at first is because there's at least 50 pounds worth of time in between where it's just, we're just working on technique. We're just working on you getting better at this skill. Now, one thing I kind of talk about when it comes to why I still recommend the barbell and everything like that is with the barbell, it's more of an investment than it is a transaction. Like, and this is like just how I kind of like tell it to people to, and like in terms that they kind of understand, because I don't want to be like a jargon, like use jargon or nothing like that. But when you invest in something, right, you put money in and then you kind of let it sit, and then it eventually like grows in value over time. That's kind of like what investing is. But when you do something more like a transaction, you put money in, you get something back immediately. So when it comes to calisthenics, machines, and things that have such a low skill cap, you put in good effort, you're going to get good results back. With a barbell, it's not really going to work out like that for quite a while, just because, you know, we do have to iron out those form cues and everything like that you want to like, that you want it to get taken care of. Because the barbell's like, it's not like it's a natural thing, you know, like I'm not saying go outside and lift the rocks and that's going to be better for you, but at the same time, like it's something you have to learn to use if you want to get the most out of it. So when it comes to like adding weight every week, that's just kind of why I do it. But then once it stops working, this should be the first place you look for programming advice, and not just a new program. Because more often than not, once starting strength stops working for you, which is a 3x5, you're like, oh, there's strong lifts. I can do a 5x5. And then you continue down that rabbit hole. And then you're like, oh, what about like the Texas method or 531 or all these programs? Because I feel like a lot of people, when they come to me, like more so from the strength side of things, they collect programs like Pokemon cards. But I'm just like, what did you learn from each one of them? Like, what did you learn from starting strength? Like starting strength, it teaches you the compound lifts very well. Like if you at least have the whole book, you know, like strong lifts, you know, it's just starting strength with more volume. Did you learn that adding volume works? Like, did you take that into consideration? It's like, oh no, I just did 5x5 because that's what it said to do. Like people run these programs all the time, but they're not really understanding the programming behind it. Same thing with 531. You should be told to get to a top set. You're told to do back off sets and like try to take those to failure. Like, did you learn about that as a result of you running that program? But instead they're just like, oh, this program got me a new PR. This program got me a new PR. Like anything you do that's new and that you apply with good effort and consistency, it's going to result in a new PR, but it's not because of the program. It's just because it was a vehicle for consistency and effort. Like we'll get into that a bit later, but going back to this topic with progressive overload, when you can no longer like just add 5 pounds each week, you want to make changes other places. One thing I recommend to my clients is, for one, don't drop in weight. This is one thing that I don't recommend to my clients who like, because I do start them out with something like a 3x5 or a 5x5. Once that stops working for them, I'll tell them, okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to change the sets and reps. So we might do 6x4, or if we were doing a 3x5, we might do 4 sets of 6, or we might even do like 5 sets of 4, 5 sets of 3, change it up a little bit and then build up somewhere else. So even if it's something as simple as, okay, we're gonna do the same, like we'll do, like, let's say we're doing a 3x5. We're gonna do 2 sets of 5. And then on that last set, I want you to try to push progression there. So we get to a point where it's like, okay, you do 2 sets of 5, and then on the last set you hit 10. All right, cool. Now we're gonna do like 1 set of 5. On the second set, I want you to try to hit as many reps as possible. And on the third set, hit as many reps as possible. Like, these are things that people are just so afraid of doing because it's not written in a nice, neat program for you. Like, if I tell them, like, just find a way to progress in some manner, that's what matters most. And even things that are not mentioned as much are super important. And that is better form and less rest time. Like, oftentimes you're told, like, okay, rest 2 to 3 minutes. If you can get your rest times in between sets from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, wouldn't you think that you gotten stronger because the amount of work that you're putting in isn't as fatiguing as it used to be? Like, that's something I feel like a lot of people are kind of like avoiding. It's like, and you brought this up with form, like, a lot of people are changing their form up to get more weight on the bar. But what if you kind of like reverted your form back to what it should be? And then you're getting stronger that way. Like, these are all ways that you induce progressive overload that people just don't really take advantage of, in my opinion.
For sure. So I think what you're saying is, like, there's a bunch of different forms of progressive overload, but obviously as humans, what do we pick? We pick the most flashy one, which is more reps, or even above that, more weight. That's the one we can brag about, or even if we're not like being egotistical about it, that's the one where we can kind of tell ourselves, yes, we made progress. Yes, it happened. But then again, if you are, let's say you're doing a 3x5 and you're kind of at that first plateau, maybe late intermediate, or not late intermediate, you're at that late beginner phase, early intermediate. Let's say you hit 225 for a 3x5 on bench. And then let's say you're resting 2 minutes between every set. Your goal is to hit 230 for a 3x5. Let's say that first set's really difficult. And then instead of resting 2 minutes, you rest 3 minutes or 4 minutes to try and get that. And then for the next set, you rest 3 or 4 minutes again to actually be able to achieve that 230. The problem there is kind of like we talked about in the last video, you're just stealing from somewhere else and kind of just hiding it away in the corner. Like, oh no, let's not pretend I did that, because at the end of the day, the number's all I care about, and that's what happened. But that's basically the same exact point as I made about hypertrophy training and how we kind of steal from other areas to make it seem like we're still making progress, applied basically into strength and powerlifting. So I can appreciate that 100%. I've experienced that myself, and I didn't necessarily realize I was doing it until I was a little bit farther on and a little bit older and was able to think more critically about, okay, looking back at this, the reason why I plateaued was because I didn't actually get stronger. I was just stealing other areas to allow me to get stronger, to keep doing the same volume, to do the same weight, to do the same reps. And I think that's a really important concept to understand, because that makes you more disciplined to stick to what you're doing. And it lets you actually choose a new plan of attack when you hit a plateau, rather than just kind of avoiding it by like pretending something didn't happen that you stole from to let you add 5 pounds for no reason.
Yeah, 100%. Because like I think it was Brett Contreras. He has like something on his website where it's just like a whole like list, like maybe 15-ish items of different things that constitute as progressive overload. And those things were like better form, less rest time, lower RPE, like with the same like a lower RPE or RAR with the same amount of sets, reps, and weight. Like maybe doing the same weight for more sets or more reps. That's progressive overload. Like there's so many different ways to make progress. And the thing is, like, while I advocate, like, you should be trying to progress week to week, like sometimes like the way that you're going to progress is so like minuscule, unnoticeable, that what matters most is that you just showed up and give your best effort. Which is why like when it comes to a certain level of strength, like you're not going to be able to add 5 pounds for quite a while. And what do you do when that happens? You don't just give up. You don't just go to a new program either. You have these other things that you can try to measure, and like other things in your program that you have to use to kind of slingshot things up. Because one thing, and we talked about this with like accessory movements, and why accessory movements is kind of like a horrible way to look at things. And I do agree with this, is because when you start looking at everything as main work, and when you start looking at everything as like important work, when you equate bodybuilding work as being as important in the program, at least from a effort perspective, it gives you multiple opportunities in the program for you to see like, okay, where am I progressing? Sometimes what I do is like, let's say this is something that happened with one of my more recent workouts. Like I hit the same exact numbers for the same exact sets and reps on my bench press that day, but then on my supplementary lift, like my dumbbell overhead press, that went up. So I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm not stalling. Um, I'm not stagnating. Like oftentimes we just associate, unless I'm making progress with this big lift, with big weight increments, with if that's where I'm making progress, then that's actual progress, and everything else is just secondary. Like when you start looking at everything as being important in the bigger picture, you need to stop thinking about that. And one thing I want to kind of talk about as far as like why you like your people are gonna like catch on to like these ways that you're stealing progressive overload, because it's gonna reveal itself in some of the worst ways. Like the thing is, injuries don't just happen. Like those little nicks and pains and stuff like that, they don't just happen. Like they don't come out of nowhere. These are things that like in the same way that progress can show itself really slowly over time, injuries build themselves up the exact same way. And the more you steal from these other sources, like your form is getting worse, you're adding way like much heavier loads with these heavier weights, like, or you're adding heavier weights with this worse form, then yeah, this is a recipe for disaster. Or let's say another thing is things are just starting to become inconvenient for you. You are getting stronger, but your workouts are now taking twice as long and you don't know why. And then you're like, well, I only have an hour to work out. This isn't working out for me anymore. Then you quit and then you get weak and small again. Like oftentimes, like we forget that for most people, lifting weights is part of their life. It's not their entire life. And then like when they're given all these pieces of information, they're not really seeing the downsides of it play out in the rest of their life. They just leave and quit. And that's one of the worst things that can happen to a new lifter, is that they quit.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of it is sustainability. And that's why I have that pretty controversial program, my beginner program. The baseline of it is a 6-day-a-week program, but you're not doing a whole ton in the gym. And I completely understand that doesn't work for everybody just based on schedule. So I made it very easy to modify down to 4 days a week. But the biggest thing for me to piggyback off of you here is that it's habit building that's going to be the biggest thing. It's long-term consistency. It doesn't matter if you're doing the most optimal lift if you can't do it long-term, if you can't actually attack it with enjoyment and passion. Like if you just half-ass something and you kind of do it and you're just taking that a little bit of motivation to get you into the gym, that's not going to last more than 3 months. But if you do a little bit each day, beginners will pretty much gain muscle from anything. But if you do a little bit each day, you're going to be getting progress. You're building that habit, and it will basically keep you in the gym long term. And then once you have that habit, that's where you can start to get into that optimal programming and the optimal lifts. You learn a lot more about yourself, your habits, your own biomechanics, what works well, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, etc. There's so many things that you learn on that journey of what lifting is, that you just have to build a habit. And once you have that down, then you can start to have some fun. It's like build the cake first, then you can start to decorate it after.
100%. Yeah. And like I saw that novice program and I like my initial reaction to it was exactly that. I was like 6 days a week. But then like when I like read it, I was like, oh, you're really not doing much. And like quite honestly, that's like on one hand, it's like because I was a personal trainer. I managed personal trainers. And on one hand, I just thought to myself, well, like if I was the reason why when it comes to personal training, part of it is because it can get really, really expensive. And sometimes like 4 sessions a week with a trainer is just outside of people's budget, like outright. Most of them can only afford maybe 1 or 2, or at least they're willing to spend. It's not really a matter of it being affordable, but rather like what they want to spend on. But anyway, but then I kind of thought to myself, like, just because they're with me 2 days a week, that doesn't mean they should be aiming to do less, right? And part of the reason why, when it comes to novice training and what I recommend, I'm just like 3 to 4 days. Because I always tell people, like, I would much rather have you be 100% with a 3 or 4 day split than you be like hit 4 out of 6 workouts with a 6 day split. Like, it's just because I don't want you to have that burden of, oh, I was inconsistent. Oh, I missed this day. Oh, like, a lot of people catastrophize and they miss a day or something like that. And as a result, things just kind of fall off the rails. But one thing I liked about your program was the fact that because it was like so little, and oftentimes when it comes to beginners, that's when they have like the highest motivation but they also have the lowest amount of skill. They have the lowest amount of like recoverability and
Yeah.
like all that kind of stuff. So I was just looking at it, I was like, oh no, this is actually like really good, because if you have a person who is very motivated, and if you have a person, even if a person isn't really that motivated, but they can meet that level of consistency and do that whole thing 4 to 6 days a week, I was like, oh cool, like this would actually like accomplish a lot for that person. So I thought it was a great novice program that you made.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think sometimes it's like with the novice program, and before I get into that, I really do appreciate you complimenting that. It does mean a lot, because I know at first glance, especially to a more experienced lifter, like we love, and when I say we, I'm talking about lifters that have kind of basically been through the mud, and we've made it out of that beginner phase.
Yeah.
We love to just recommend, 3 times a week, 5x5, and you'll be fine. It's like, no, that will not get you optimal results. So you're going to burn yourself out quickly. Like, why, if I was in the gym 6 times a week doing a little bit and just kind of like, I know greasing the groove isn't the right term for this, but I was just kind of going in, making it happen, doing these lifts that aren't going to be fatiguing. Like, I didn't touch a barbell until I was in my intermediate phase. I just did dumbbells and cables and a couple machines. And it's like, those are not tiring at all, like in a fatiguing manner, but they'll get you results. So you see progress, you're not getting very fatigued, you're getting a good pump, and you're capturing that motivation that you have as a beginner, that initial like love at first sight for the gym, and you're capturing that, and over time through the results and through the habit of going 6 times a week, you're turning that into a discipline, and eventually that's what leads to your long-term success. Like, when I was going to the gym 3 times a week doing full body strength and conditioning workouts when I was in high school, I didn't stick with it because I wasn't necessarily getting the best results that I wanted. And I was only going 3 times a week. So it's like, yeah, I mean, if I felt like crap on a Tuesday, or felt like crap in my own mind, I could just do it Thursday. I could do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But when you're in the gym 6 days a week, it's like, no, you have to find a way to make it happen. Like, yeah, the workout's probably going to be 25 or 30 minutes, but we can all make that happen. And then you slowly increase on that over time. And the great thing about hypertrophy is it's a long-term goal. So it's not like you're like, oh, I'm in 6 months, I'm out of my beginner phase, let's go from 30 minutes to an hour and a half. Not how that works.
Yeah, yeah.
Works at all. So that's why I'm a little bit, and I know I haven't talked about it yet, but I'm a little bit more of an advocate of getting into barbells actually when you're an intermediate rather than beginner, just because of that. Because yeah, you'll make really good strength gains with the barbell because of the skill you learn. But I would argue that it's better to, like you said, learn the skill before adding weight. And at the same time, you're not necessarily going to get those hypertrophy gains if you focus on the barbell and focus on technique at first. So,
Oh well, yeah, 100%.
some less fatiguing stuff, making muscular gains, building the habit and turning that into discipline, and then maybe reaping what you can out of those barbell compounds would be best. And obviously, we can save that whole discussion for another time, but I think we've talked about that enough in our little back and forth response videos. But yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you a ton on pretty much everything you just said.
Yeah, and for me, I personally truly 100% believe that the best foundation for, like, this is just opinion right now, like, it's calisthenics. I truly believe that if you are new to lifting, obviously, like, there, like, when it comes to new lifters and what you, the viewer, should do, it's gonna boil down to a little bit of like soul searching. It's gonna come to a little bit of experimentation, finding what you like. Because like I know a couple of people, like, if you tell them to do a push-up, they're like, no, I'd rather just go home and eat McDonald's. But then if you tell them like do a barbell bench press, they're like, oh, you had me at barbell. So like sometimes it's a little like, personality is a programming factor. It's something, it's a variable that you need to manipulate and like kind of go through. But with that being said, I truly believe that when you're first starting out, one of your best friend is calisthenics, because it just scales so well to your current level of fitness. There's so many regressions and progressions just built into it in general. And then like the skill you get from it just goes even further. And I've definitely come around more so to like having barbells be a bit more of a like higher priority later down the line. But with that being said, I always like it from the beginning, just because it's really easy to build a skill when that skill isn't being loaded. Like when that skill is not being like, it's not challenging you, it's not testing you, it's really just, you're just learning it, Like if I told you like if you were like, if you had a kid or something like that, and you're like, all right, you're going to learn how to ride a bike, and then the first thing you do is you take him to a mountain, and then you're like, it's kind of like there's a lot of steps that you're kind of skipping, you know. So it's kind of like, I would say that the barbell is something similar to that in my mind, where like, yes, the bike is going to be great, you know, it's a skill you have the rest of your life, it'll keep you fit and whatnot, but the thing is, like, you need to build it up in steps. And then that the one thing that and part of the reason why I advocate it so much is because when it comes to the barbell, it doesn't belong to strength sports. It doesn't belong to powerlifting. It doesn't belong to just squat, bench, deadlift, 1 rep max. And that's one thing I feel like we're slowly moving away from, which I am, I'm not like, you know, I don't want to just like be so firmly planted into one ideology and like just completely miss everything else. Because one thing that's kind of come up in the past like couple years is that, you know, we are getting a lot smarter with how we train nowadays. Like the natural lifters who've been lifting for 10 plus years, like, because it takes us that long to get really impressive results, are now like, hey, this is what I've been doing for the past couple of years. It really does work. And then like it kind of comes out. Like it takes a while for that to happen. And that's why like when it came to that point in time where it was YouTube fitness and it was just all those natural, or not natural, like fake natties and the dudes who you know, like just had horrible like training practices, went to a rave that night and then went back to the gym and still had a six pack. It's like, it took a while because like all the naturals like, oh, I hate that motherfucker. And then they just like were in the gym, like getting their gains. But old school bodybuilders, like guys that I look up to, like, you know, you can debate like if they're natural or whatever, but the guys I tend to talk to as far as like natural bodybuilders, like guys like John Grimmick and Chet Yorton, like I am inclined to believe that they were natural, at least for most of their training career. Like we can argue like, well, maybe at some point they got onto it or something like that. But I do think that their physiques at least are very much naturally attainable. And how did they do it? Big, basic barbell compound lifts and isolations. Part of it is just because they didn't have access to the machines that we had. The machines that they had probably weren't as good, or they didn't reach their peak at the time, because bodybuilding, hypertrophy training, it's still very niche. So they had to rely on these like old school methods, but they still worked. Now, is that to say that they were the best because they worked? No. We are experiencing a time where we're able to see like, while it did work, we are able to find ways that things could have worked better. But at the same time, when you are taking steps toward better, you don't just completely obliterate everything you did beforehand. And that's something like I feel like a lot of people, and this might just be from as a result of people I talk to in my little part of the world. But some of them, they really like for 20 plus years, they lifted with barbells and free weights. And then all of a sudden they're just like, oh, I just do machines now. And then when they're training other people, just do machines, only do machines, like only do cables, only do this. Don't even touch, don't worry about the barbell. Don't even touch it. It's not worth it. And then because they look so good, because they've been training for that long, they've been maybe possibly on roids, they start producing content, and then other people start buying into that, and then they start to wonder like, oh shoot, where's my gains?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I hate to speak on people that I've never actually watched, you know, whose videos. So I don't want to speak on him. I can infer that I probably have a pretty good idea of what we're talking about here. But
and the thing is, like, it's not like he's the only one who does it. Like, like, so yeah. Like I live in like, well, I'll keep it a secret, but where I live, there's a couple bodybuilding gyms, like made by IFBB pros. 98 to 99% of their gym is nothing but machines and nothing but people who are sauced to the gills, and people who are just like, or maybe either sauce to the gills or full of plastic and like look really pretty on their Instagrams. And that's all that their gym has. Like, but the thing is, like, people want to look like them. Then they go to the gyms that they go to. They follow their training advice. They follow their horrible eating practices. And I mean, who am I to talk about that? Because I eat a lot. But it's just kind of like they fall into those things and they just don't get what they want. And honestly, if I truly believe that one thing I love about the gym, you put in hard work, you get something tangible, you get something real, you get something fulfilling back. And I feel like a lot of people hijack that with like horrible training practices, horrible information. And that's something I just really dislike.
Right. Well, I think part of what you're talking about the old school bodybuilders and how they made their gains is basically through free weights only. And that's 100% legit. Like they just trained barbells. They did barbell rows, overhead press, squat, bench, deadlift, RDLs, calf raises, all sorts of curls and tricep extensions and skull crushings and whatnot. Like that's all super legit training. And I think a couple points that I have here about new, probably more modern variations is that there's never going to be something magical that gets you just better results than a barbell. You can argue at certain points in your training, there are certain tools that are going to be better than a barbell. But in the big picture, the upside of every piece of equipment, generally speaking, if you train it properly with the four fundamentals that I talk about, you're going to get the same results. The problem with that, or I guess the difference between the two, is at certain points in your training, certain lifts are going to have basically fewer downsides. So if you're an advanced lifter, I would argue that a machine would give you better results than a barbell. So let's just take a barbell squat, for example. I would argue that you get better gains on the hack squat than you would on a barbell squat once you're an advanced lifter. And not because the hack squat stimulates more muscle or is no stabilization or whatever. Like, yeah, those are some benefits, but at the same time, it's the downsides of the barbell are it's going to take more of a toll on your joints. It's going to be harder to recover from. You have to do more warm-ups. You do have to stabilize it, which isn't necessarily necessary for hypertrophy in the first place. So it's not that it's better, it's just that it has fewer downsides for where you're at in your training. But at the same time, if you're like an early intermediate, there are so many gains you can make from the barbell, because at that point, learning stabilization and challenging your muscles in a new way like that is actually more beneficial than it would be for once you've already gone through that phase. And the machine, yeah, it doesn't have that many downsides, but it's like you have a very incomplete physique when you're an intermediate. So maybe getting a compound lift isn't the worst idea with a barbell or something like that. But then again, this is a little bit of a different point that I have here. The difference between a barbell and a machine, and the reason this kind of basically fits into why I want to end the term accessory lift, is because you have a lot of people that are like in love with barbells, and then they'll try a machine and they're like, oh, I'm not getting as good results. It's like, well, you have your bias. You're going to train that machine way hard. I mean, you're going to train that barbell way harder than you're going to train that machine. But if you trained them equally, you would have the same results. The problem is you're all hyped up and pumped up to train a movement like a barbell that you actually like and care about, and you're not going to execute the machine properly. But if you're indifferent and you're just trying to get bigger, then you have to assess where you're at and what movement makes more sense for you. That's kind of the difference in my mind.
Oh, 100%. And like, that's why, like, I don't know, this is a great quote by Mike Tyson. And he says, like, I hated every second of training, but I did it like I loved it. Like, for me, right? I did not like, or let me use an example that I still don't like. I'm gonna be quite honest. Bicep training is one of the most mentally draining things for me personally. The moment I get to that point in my program and I move the bicep, like my bicep curls up in my program, so that way they're a bit like earlier in the day, because I can like put in, because I have more energy, so I have to put in more energy for it. But I put more of a priority onto it, and it took me a while to just kind of be like, you know what, I'm gonna do it like I love it. I'm gonna do it like it's my bench press. I'm gonna do it like it's my overhead press. And that's when I started making more gains in it. And then sometimes it's just a matter of like, there's a lot of small ways that we kind of like black pill ourselves into thinking that something's just not worth it. Like, I definitely have experienced a point with like my squat where there was a point in time where like I was doing my squat really well, really consistently. And like I saw gains in it and everything was good. I actually liked the squat. But every year prior to that, I was just like, just bench and deadlift. I hate the squat. I'm not good at it. Like, when it becomes like I hate doing something, and then but it's okay to not like doing something. But I think the worst thing that a person can do mentally for their training is to tell themselves that they're not built for it, they're not good for it. Because then you kind of give yourself an excuse, you give yourself a way out. Like if you don't like it, like, there's no real way to argue against that, like at least in my opinion. But like to say that you're not good at something, it's like, have you tried it? Have you tried doing it like you love it? And like more often than not, they really haven't. And then sometimes that might be what it takes for you to get good results from it, and maybe find out that you do like it. So
yeah, well, that's one of the biggest points about kind of embracing like a more of a stoic outlook and philosophy on not just life but lifting too. If you're looking at lifting in a stoic way, and you say like, okay, I'm let's say I don't name drop. Damn it. I'm not going to say this guy's name, but let's say you trick yourself into thinking you have bad genetics or whatever, or bad leverages. And I'm not saying that's not a real thing, but it's way overblown. But
Oh yeah.
the difference between somebody that's mentally weak is they look for reasons not to do something. So if they somehow think that they have bad leverages, let's say you're trying to increase your 1 rep max on squat and you're a power lifter, if you're like, oh, I have long femurs or whatever, that's like, if you're black pilled like that, your immediate thought is like, okay, well, I can't squat, or I shouldn't squat, or I'm never going to get a good squat because of this. But if you're more of like a stoic and you think in ways of like, okay, so we ran into this wall of bad leverages, somebody with a weaker mindset, basically, and I don't want to say the word loser is like kind of harsh, so I'm not going to say that. But if you're somebody that doesn't have that strong mindset yet, you're going to see a wall, and it's a wall. You can't get around it. You can't get over it. You're just going to run into it and be like, all right, no point in trying to get over this. I'm just going to walk back and give up. But a winner that kind of overcomes whatever like little adversity they face is going to find a way to go around the wall, go under the wall, go above the wall, or even break through the wall somehow with more effort and more critical thinking about this stuff. And that's the difference between somebody that has the right mindset and has the wrong mindset. But one of the biggest problems that you see in this industry and with a lot of lifters is that you run into a little bit of adversity because we all have some type of genetic or mental weakness, and you just give up. You don't find a way to actually break through that and embrace your weakness and hammer it down to turn it into a strength. And that's the biggest problem, is like, just because we're not genetically gifted in one area, or we're not going to ever be the best at something, does not mean you shouldn't try or shouldn't do it.
Yeah, 100%. And like, so because I come more so from this like strength side of things, like I would watch like a lot of like YouTube fitness content and like see people lifting numbers that I was just like this is like when I just hit a 3-plate bench or a 3-plate like deadlift, not 3-plate bench, that took a lot longer, but with the 3-plate deadlift, I was like, damn. And then the guys were hitting 500, 600, 700, and then like, you know, whether or not they're natural or whatever, I didn't really care, because I was just like, there's this, I think it was Marcus Aurelius who said like, if it's humanly possible, then it is within your grasp. And when I heard that, or like, I'm sure I misquoted it or misread that, but now that is what stuck with me. And I was just like, if it's humanly possible, it's within my grasp. Now, does that mean I'm going to reach it? Does that mean I'm going to attain it? Maybe not, but I don't care. It's within my grasp. So I'm going to try to hit it. So I would argue that I am not very genetically predisposed to be strong. I'm not very I don't really think of myself as like having shown like I was just as strong as an ox or something like that when I first started lifting. Like I said, linear progression stalled for me very quickly. Like the first time I benched I was hitting 185, but that was because I did 2 years of calisthenics before then. So I was doing years of push-ups. So years of push-ups, years of dips and everything like that. And my first time benching, 185. So I don't know where that would land, whether like maybe that is kind of strong, and maybe my standards are just skewed. That's a possibility. But I personally didn't really think of it all that impressive, especially considering that at that point in time, I already been doing like a lot of pushing, like as far as calisthenics goes. I know it's not the same, but you know, the volume. And then when I hit 205, that was my first plateau. I hit my first plateau where I just couldn't get above 205 for like at least 6 to maybe 8-10 weeks. Like I was running against that wall the entire time. Like that was the first time I hit a plateau with 205, not 225, 205. And then I hit another wall at 225. Like I really did not think of myself as being anything genetically great when it came to strength, but I did not care. And like every single time I went to the gym, I just put in work. Every time I went, like whether or not I made progress, I just went back the next day, put in work. One of my favorite anime, and I'm another one of those new YouTube lifters who like just talks about anime all the time, is Hajime no Ippo. And there's this episode, like to not be too spoilery, but there's this episode where these guys get involved with the boxing gym that they're going to, right? And they are basically going up against the guy who literally beats their ass every single day. And that guy who beats their ass just says, come back tomorrow. That was the gym for me. I just came back tomorrow and I did it. Like, and I feel like a lot of people, like, you know, when it comes to investing, one of like, then going back to this analogy, people like to say like, oh, you need to have money to make money. You need to have a lot of money already to put in a lot of money into toward investing. But if you talk to someone who's really into investing, really into making money like that, passive income, no, they just say, give what you can. Like whether it's like $10, $20, maybe 10% of your income per month, 5%, 1%, it doesn't matter. Give what you can. Over time, it'll grow. Like the thing is, a lot of people, they really buy into that attitude, like, oh, unless I have good genetics, unless I have good leverages, unless I have good this, unless I have good that, like a good parents or whatever, then I'm not going to get that big. I'm not going to get that strong. And this is like, why do you care about that? Like they don't care about you. They don't care like that. Like life didn't care that you like wanted good parents to be a good bodybuilder. Like it didn't care. So why should you? Like just go in there and lift. So like, yeah, definitely have a more stoic mindset. Like I can't recommend that enough when it comes to a lot of these things, because more often than not, when it comes to like plateaus, I would honestly say that a mindset change is going to be more beneficial than anything else.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And one of my video topics that I haven't released yet is like, are you in a lifting plateau? Read books. And it's like, what does that mean? But it's like, no, it's your mindset. And I'm very glad you said that, because I think it's 100% true. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, how do we change your mindset? How do we change your way of thinking to actually be able to bust through that plateau? Because obviously physical plateaus are a real thing, but to have a different mindset and get a different perspective to actually learn something new that will help you get through that plateau. And to kind of build off this point, one of the points that you had here on our notes is just overall self-reflection, exploration, experimentation, and how that will benefit lifters more than adherence to their quote unquote idols. And I think we could have a pretty good talk about that. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, like first of all, there's no heroes and there's no gods of YouTube. Like that's rule number one. Like this is something that I experience a lot as a personal trainer. And it happened every time I talked to someone who did watch YouTube fitness. And I would give them a piece of advice, and then they would say something back like, well, I know you don't name drop, but I'm going to do it. Is that okay?
Go for it. Yeah, you're good.
All right. So they'd hit me with something like, well, Athlete X told me to do this. I was like, all right, I'm not Athlete X. Like if you came to me and you expected me to just tell you everything that someone else is telling you, then why did you even come to me? I really don't like it when people like just think to themselves, like, unless so sometimes like even with my own programs, I get this where like they'll take my program, they'll look into it, they'll be like, this is so interesting, this is something I'm really into, but then they'll like say like, but Athlete Next tells me to do this, but Jeff Nippard says this, but this person does this person does that, and then they're just like, well, what about this? And I was like, hey, listen to me, my programs are made for you to change them. There's nothing magical about my program. There's nothing magical about it in the sense that it's going to make you a world champion. All that programs are, and I want to strip them down to their bare basic bones and everything like that, is for you to maximize consistency and effort. That's all a program is. Any program that promises you more than that, any person who promises you more than that, is always full of shit. I mean, the thing is, when you look at like what those charlatans like promise you, how to get a bigger bench, like how to get 50 pounds on your bench in 4 weeks, how to add 5 inches to your arms in 1 month, how to they're basically promising you how to get a bigger dick. But like if something like that really existed, like we'd all be slinging around what we want, like it's not like that. It's never going to be like that. There's no magic pill. There's nothing like that at all. And that extends to the people's trying to sell you these things, because they really do buy into their ideology of them being above other people. And it's not really the case. This is why I said personality is a programming variable. And your influencer, your idol, the person you listen to, they're not taking that into account more often than not when they make these programs. They're really not. So right. When people have these questions about, can I do this? Can I do that? You have to try it. You have to see if you like it. And you have to see if you can progress with it. Because then if you can, I promise you, the gains, the strength, the size that you get from that will be significantly better than what anyone else can like tell you to do.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where the individuality of it really comes into play, because all of the scam artists aside, all the fake natties aside, for even with like the legit lifters that give legit advice, you're still going to find somebody that for everything that somebody says is right, you're going to find somebody says that that's wrong. And for everybody that says this is most optimal, you're going to find somebody that says the opposite. And that's just how it is with lifting. And at the end of the day, a lot of people get caught up, and myself included in the past, is like, okay, well, how do I know what's right and what's wrong? It's like, no, they're kind of all right. It's just finding what's right for you. And not that anything's necessarily going to be wrong for you. You're just finding out what's the most optimal. And that's really what it comes down to when it comes to following these people and getting their advice and whatnot.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say, hey, what's up to your cat? So one thing I want to say with this is like this. One thing I want to make very clear. This is not an advocation for like everyone is a special snowflake. There's a magic exercise out there specifically for you that's going to be so great for you. That's not what we're like. That's not what I'm saying, and I don't think that's what you're saying. So when it comes to what is right, like what is right for you, that's a very small circle, right? But it's a very small circle that exists in a very big circle of what is right. And a lot of things fit into that. Barbells, machines, cables, dumbbells, calisthenics. A lot of people have the right pieces of the puzzle, and they all exist in that big circle of what is right. But what's right for you might not be everything that's in there. And that's a-okay. And that's something that I feel like a lot of people need to really be okay with. Because, I know anecdotal evidence may not be the best all the time, but it's not horrible, especially when it's for you. Yeah, like it's like, especially when it's relevant to you, when it's coming from you. Like, this worked for me. Keep doing it. That's the best. Like I swear to you, like what's gonna change your life more? Like, I'm asking the viewer, what's gonna change your life more? You finding out what works best in a study, or like for 100 people, or what works best for you? What will have more impact on your life? If you can tell like 80 out of 100 people, like, oh, this style of training is going to benefit you, or if you find that one thing that's going to make you take your gains and your strength to the next level, I promise you, every single person would probably choose the latter. Yeah. So at least that's what I would think. That's what I would choose, like being completely honest. Like if I had to find out, like, either I definitively put a flag saying like barbells are the best thing in the world, or I'm just going to find something new that's going to benefit me and like get me to my goals like better or whatever, I'm going to choose that. And I feel like doing all your research is a very crucial and vital part. Like a lot of people, like with the whole like YouTube fitness, like science-based training, like we forget that science is a process. We forget that part of it is like, you yourself having your own hypothesis, you yourself having your own like question that you're trying to seek an answer for. And then you do your own research. And that's where we come in. That's where like all the channels that we watch come in. Like we're just doing research. We're finding out what is in that big circle of right. And then you have to do that very important step of finding your small circle of what is right for you.
Yeah, well, I think great point. Just want to say first off, that's a great point about the science and finding out what's right for you. And that's ultimately a lot of my lifting philosophy as well. But at the end of the day, it's like you have these studies and not all of them are necessarily done the best. Not necessarily all of them are done long-term either, which lifting really is a long-term. Like at the end of the day, if we're showing one exercise provides better results over 8 weeks, like, is that really the better exercise long-term? We don't know. Maybe not. So at the end of the day, what it all comes down to is experiment with yourself, figure out what's best for you. I mean, obviously it's highly individual. So just because, like you were saying, if a study shows that high bar squats are better than low bar squats for quad growth in 80 out of 100 people, it's up to you to figure out if you're in the 80 or if you're in the 20. And that's really all it comes down to. You just have to experiment with your own stuff and kind of figure it out on your own. And as I hate to put like these arbitrary words on it. And I hate to like just call myself an advanced lifter because I don't know if I'm there yet. Like by strength standards, I guess I am advanced, whatever, but I'll call myself like a late intermediate, early advanced or whatever. We'll see as the time goes on. But one thing, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is at the end of the day, we're going to end up with results. And at the end of the day, we all know we're going to try multiple methods of lifting. And when you can make it 5 years into lifting, 8 years into lifting, 10 years into it, we're going to look back and realize what gave us the best results, what was the most sustainable, what made us want to go to the gym and crush those workouts. And that's ultimately what's going to be best for us, as long as it's like a legit training method. And at the end of the day, you realize it's all about the journey anyways. And once you can find that part of the journey that you really liked, you can continue on with that into the rest of your training. And just, there's a couple different ways that I view being an advanced lifter. You can either just try and milk out the last of your gains and keep going and just test the limits of how far you can take things naturally, or you can just turn it into more of like a lifestyle. Like, this is just what I do. I'll probably end up making some gains, but you're just focusing on the journey. You're focusing on the training, not so much the outcome of everything. And it's all about the journey. And ultimately, anecdotes, people will shit on these and say it's dumb, just follow the science. And you have all these people that are just tunnel vision science, but personal experience is a pretty legit thing. So I found that out kind of the hard way, where I just followed the science so hard, and I followed like that one influencer I'd watch for like a year, and I'd follow his exact program, and I'm like, oh, this actually isn't that good. And then I'd follow someone else. I'm like, oh, this actually isn't that good. And then I was like, okay, well, why am I following other people so much? Let me follow myself, figure out what I want to do, figure out what works. And that's finally where I kind of broke out of that like fitness dogma and started to turn into like my own lifter and really build up that own individuality. And I'm just, it's all about the journey. I can ramble on for hours about it, and I'm saying the same thing. It's all about the journey.
Yeah, 100. You brought up something that like kind of made me think of Bruce Lee. Now, I'm like, the reason why I'm bringing up Bruce Lee is like, for one thing, like so every time I bring up Bruce Lee, like there's all like, I don't know what I've noticed, at least everyone's gonna be like, Bruce Lee, the goddamn hero. And it's just like, it's like, all right, yes, cool, like cool it down, but like Jeet Kune Do is actually pretty shit when it comes to self-defense. Like, you could, like, if you, the viewer, want to like argue with me on that, we can have a discussion another time. But like, the thing that was really useful with Bruce Lee was his idea that take what is useful, discard what isn't. And you don't have to become attached to the person giving you the information, because if they give you a useful piece of information, that doesn't mean you owe the person who gave it to you anything. It doesn't mean that everything that they are saying is like, if they give you one nugget of gold, that doesn't mean everything that they have is gold. Maybe that's the only piece of gold they have in their inventory of information. So there's that. But then the other part of it is like, when it comes down to like knowing yourself, sometimes it just takes like experimenting with all these other things. And if you're too afraid to do it, and then you get so bogged down into the science of things, like you might be trying to like live off the knowledge learned from everyone else, but because you're not getting the most important knowledge with this, which is self-knowledge, you're not getting anything useful out of this. And that's like just horrible, quite honestly.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's all about kind of accruing that knowledge, accruing that experience. And ultimately that's what life is. Like, yeah, the results are great, and that's what we started everything for. But and this isn't just lifting, this applies to really any accomplishment in life. We always hear people say it's about the journey. It's about what we made of the journey and what we learned along the way that turned you into that person that deserves that accomplishment. And it's not the accomplishment itself, it's the person that journey turned you into. It's the knowledge you accrued, it's the experience, it's all that stuff. And you're rewarded. But as great as that is, you either continue on and try and go higher, or you move into something else. And we could talk kind of philosophy like that all day, but I know we got a couple more points you want to talk on here. So
yeah, like the one I would like to get into a bit next is like my personal pillars for size and strength.
Yeah.
Like, so when it comes to size and strength, like size and or strength, like, you know, being exclusive with it, really, in my opinion, it all comes down to two things: consistency and effort. I like truly believe that these are the most important things, because like every training principle, every programming tip, in some way goes back to these two things in some manner. So when it comes to like, let's say strength training, part of the reason why we recommend what we recommend as far as like strength athletes and strength coaches go is for sustainability purposes. Like, Why do we recommend doing reps when the most specific thing that you can do, like, most specific, is singles? Because singles are not sustainable in the long term. The amount of overall load you'd have to lift every time is just not that great. The amount of time you're going to have to put in versus what you're getting out of it isn't that great. So why are we recommending what we do? To make it more sustainable. When it comes down to like size training, you can't just add weight all the time. It's not a sustainable way to go about things. Oftentimes when it comes to like a lot of things recommend, it goes back to that. Consistency is two things: sustainability and enjoyment. That's why researching into yourself, learning yourself, experimenting yourself is so important, is because you need to make sure that you can that you enjoy your training enough to not hate it. Because the thing is, like let's say you have someone who's trying to diet, right? We all know you need more fruits and veggies in your life. Now, does that mean you need to have every single kind of fruit and vegetable in your life? No. Some people like apples, some people like bananas, some people like broccoli, some people like spinach. Like, you need to make sure that your diet is made of what's good for you, but also you like to a reasonable extent. Now, I know, like, for the person who likes eating burgers, fries, and pizza all the time, like, vegetables are the devil. And then you can just look at it as a necessary evil, but there's some evils that even you wouldn't touch. Like, some of them, like, I can tolerate this, like a bowl of spinach, but you give me like a cauliflower, I'm gonna puke. Like, that's just kind of how it is. And that kind of how it is with training also. Sometimes when it comes to the exercise selection that you do, the split that you do, like, quite honestly, these all serve one thing: consistency. That's it. If you have those efforts, a lot of the things, if you have consistency taken care of in conjunction with effort, you can't have one without the other. Because if you just have nothing but effort, like all you have like 100% effort, like, but zero consistency, you're not going to get anything. But then at the same time, let's say you're like full of consistency. You go every single day for 6 days a week, but there's absolutely zero effort in the long term. Like, there's no progression. There's no proximity to failure. There's no manipulation of volume and intensity. There's no changes in your exercise selection. Those are things that I kind of like put under the umbrella effort. Even if you're consistent, you're not going to make any gains. You need both consistency and effort. So, like, when it comes to your split, when it comes to your progression scheme, when it comes to your exercise selection, at the end of the day, those are the only things that you should be asking yourself. Is it something that's sustainable? And maybe it isn't. Like, maybe and especially if you're strength oriented, it probably isn't. You can't just do 8s all the time and think that you're going to hit a 1 rep max. You will need to like change things up over time. But generally speaking, like, that is all things that you kind of learn to serve that sustainability part. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know we talked about your pillars like before.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I do think, as much as I love fundamentals, I will always preach my 4 fundamentals for sure. But
and they're great fundamentals.
I appreciate it. But for the viewers here, I just want you guys to listen to it, because what you're hearing Karel say is that there's 2 pillars, and let's break that down real quick. So, no pun intended, but pillars are what holds everything together. That's what holds everything up. Without pillars, you're going to see a collapse. That's the problem. So you can't change anything. Like, if you're trying to build your dream home, you need the foundation first. It's 100% necessary, because everything else you try and build on top of it will just fall down and break. So why are you worrying so much about all these tiny little things and like angles and variations and strengths and weaknesses if you don't have the foundation? At the start of your training, you're basically just taking a wild guess at what program is best for you. The only thing you have to do is apply consistency and effort. Those are your pillars. At the end of that program, at the end of 6 months, 1 year, whatever, you're going to realize, okay, what worked well, what didn't go so well, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and you modify accordingly, whether you want to continue with your strengths and be very proficient in a certain way, or if you want to work on your weaknesses and have a more balanced approach to everything. That's something you can't find out until you apply those pillars and actually build those pillars in your training. So props to you, Karel, for coming up with that. That's a very good way to put everything.
Yeah, and like, I mean, it's just what I've come to recognize as a result of me realizing I just don't know enough. But the thing is, like, but when I say that, it's also because anytime that new information gets incorporated, there's no new information that I or anyone, in my opinion, can give you that will supersede these two things. If you aren't consistent and if you can't apply effort over time, it's not going to matter. Like, I am a huge fan of Steve Shaw, Massive Iron. So he's a huge inspiration to me, and he's pointed in the direction of many different places as far as like people I like to watch and everything like that. And as much of their content as I consume, because I consume YouTube content like entertainment. Like if I'm like driving anywhere, I'm watching like a YouTube channel. Like um I am listening to strength podcasts. I'm listening to bodybuilders talk. I'm listening to whatever is the newest study, even though I'm not the most scientifically minded person and definitely not the most scientifically minded like trainer or whatnot. But you know, it doesn't really matter what they tell me or what new pieces of information come out. None of them can break apart these two things, because quite honestly, like the reason why you can meet guys in the gym who you ask them anything about their training and they know nothing, like the science bros, the people who are like so deep into the literature, will have a heart attack listening to them because they're just saying nonsense. They're just saying things that they're like, but he's suboptimal, like my science. But then because they just mastered consistency and effort, like they're so much bigger than them. And then like, and that's why we can't ignore those things. Like, why does that happen? Because of consistency and effort. It's not the science, it's not the programming, it's not this, it's not that. Like, the all of those things have to serve these two things, in my opinion. And that's why like everything else is just kind of secondary to it. And we kind of get lost in trying to find new and flashy ways to do things. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
100%. And very, very well said. I think the two pillars of consistency and effort are probably, as simple as it is, that's I think some of your best stuff. I really do appreciate that, because one quick point before I want to move on, you have another thing on here that I want to get to before we end this. We all know people that train suboptimally, but they trained their workout with enthusiasm. They had the headphones on, they showed up every day and they crushed it. Like, okay, so we all know there's a couple guys from your football team or from high school or college or whatever that didn't train properly. They didn't train optimally, but they applied the effort and the consistency and they just attacked it viciously. They were always the most jacked. You can take like, oh, I'll just watch. I love Jeff Nippard's channel, but you can tell some of those guys that just constantly consume him are over analyzing, they're overthinking. Nothing against Jeff Nippard's videos because they're super helpful, but you do have to apply that properly. That's just some icing on the cake, which is those two pillars that you were talking about. So the next topic I want to move on to, there is something I want to finish on, but I kind of have to ask you this one. So I know you put a note here about your YouTube fitness BS meter, talking about vlogs and drama channels. I know this isn't the most educational or informational, but we can all learn something about the purpose of these channels and the pros and the cons and how they can negatively affect you. So I want to hear your thoughts, and then I do want to have a little response on this.
Yeah, so like I've been watching YouTube fitness for like, let's see, I'm horrible at math, so it's gonna take me a minute. About 6 years now. Yeah, 6 years. So 6 years. So a lot of channels have come and gone in the past 6 years. And like a lot of the channels that were being talked about in high school, they're still doing the same content that they've been doing since that time. And it was always about like their girlfriends cheating on them, the new car that they're getting, and why they're suffering from success, and all those kind of things, right? So I really didn't like those vlog channels. I really just couldn't for the life of me understand why watching a pretty boy cook was like popular. Like I was just like, let me just go to the gym.
Yeah,
So
well, a lot of those videos and just the pretty boy cook, that one's funny because that led to a lot of people, like people I've trained and people that I've been friends with and people that I see comment online, like they are so overly concerned with their diet when they're not even training hard enough to build muscle in the first place. So they're so concerned about their macros and their body fat percentage. It's like, this is a video I'll be releasing soon, but focus on the muscle, focus on building muscle.
yeah.
Everything else will come with it. But I think one of the biggest things that I've realized with my experience is, for somebody like me or you, and I'm mostly referring to me here, is I like to I need to have my time by myself where I'm just watching YouTube or chilling out or whatever. Even the gym's a good time for me like that, where I'm just kind of by myself, headphones on and just zoned out. I'm not going to say like I'm an introvert because I think it's dumb to basically like strive for these specific identities. But like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I love being by myself for certain periods of time. In a lot of that time, I do like to watch YouTube fitness. And especially when I was a little bit younger and maybe didn't have as many responsibilities to do, I would spend time on YouTube fitness. And eventually, yeah, you get into YouTube fitness to learn the science of training and learn the fundamentals and learn how to navigate things properly. But eventually some of these channels turn into like vlog channels. And I didn't realize this until like years after I started getting into it. But when I was that 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, you watch these videos and they're generally either guys that are on PEDs or they're just advanced lifters, and you're almost living through them. Like even if you're completely disconnected and you have no like, I know natural hypertrophy talks about this all the time, but that parasocial relationship, even if you don't, even if you're not that far, which a lot of people are that far, you're still living through them. You're still seeing what it's like to be someone that's way bigger and stronger than you are. And eventually, at first, it starts off as motivation, but eventually it turns into some complacency because you're living through that person. Even if you don't think you are, just watching those videos, even just every now and then, you're getting too much of an idea of what it's like to be that. And it's now you've already been there. And that led to my own complacency a couple of years ago when I was like, I need to stop watching this stuff. And since then, I haven't watched any vlogs, partially because I outgrew them and partially because I kind of realized this is bad. Like seeing these guys that are bigger and stronger than me all the time is getting it so normalized, and I'm so used to seeing it that it's like I feel like I already have the experience of what it's like to be them. But how does that help me? Like at first it was some motivation. I was like, oh, I want to look like that, or I want to see what that guy does to be like that. But eventually that just turns into basically like complacency because now I've lived so much through them. I know what it's like. And now I have no desire of my own to actually achieve that goal in the first place. And that's probably one of the most, I hate to say toxic, but I feel like toxic's the right word here. So I hate that word, but it is very
Yeah,
toxic.
it's been thrown out very carelessly lately. But
Yeah, I can't stand that word. I'm very sad
100%.
that I just said it. That's a word on this channel.
Right. I like there's a couple words that like are like that. But no, yeah, and like when you like live through these people, and this is something that I just feel is like, for one, it's very unearned and it's temporary. You are living through the strength of another person. That means like you feel like because you watched someone else deadlift X amount of weight, that you yourself have already done it. And then what does that do to your training? Like it makes you feel like, okay, I don't need to train as hard. Like, because like maybe it might be subtle and it might only reveal itself in that way subconsciously, meaning it's happening without your consent, it's happening without your full knowledge. But I do truly believe it happens when you look at other people with these physiques and bodies and things of that nature, but you're not looking at yourself, you're not looking at your own reflection and everything like that. That's when it just becomes totally useless. And like for me, one thing that I recommend, like that I do as far as like when I watch YouTube fitness, when I watch other people train or anything like that, I could not for the life of me understand what made people compelled to watch other people like put up their not put up their training videos, but like for one, like hide it into like it's a 10-second clip of them benching in a 20-minute vlog. That I couldn't understand. But like let's say for example, like like natural hypertrophy, ball omni man, like those, less than a minute, you see their lifts and everything like that. For me, it wasn't until like at a certain point I just realized this. I get fired up by watching that for one simple reason, not because they are better than me and I feel like I need to catch up, but because these are people who are actively giving their information out for free, showing you the results of that information, and then are basically implying that you can do this too. And because of that, I'm just like, this is useful, this is valuable. That's why I started putting up my own like training like stuff like that. But the thing is, like when it comes to like these other channels, it's like I said, it's 10 seconds of training, 20 minutes of this vlog talking about things that are not of any use, because it goes to show just for some of these channels how little they know about training other people. Because even if they can like make it work for themselves, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to everyone else around you, especially if you decide that you want to have a channel or anything like that. You need to
Right.
make sure that it does benefit the people that you're trying to talk to.
Yeah, 100%.
And
At the end, oh, you can continue on.
oh, thank you. I might have actually just lost it, but it's okay. Like, not your fault. I lose my train of thought so
I
bad.
thought you were done. My bad.
It's okay. It's okay. But yeah, like when it comes to those channels, like they keep talking about their diets. They keep talking about the drama in their life because they can't put into words their own training practices. They can't put into words their own training principles. They don't really know what worked for them. And that's something that's horrible. That's why when it comes to a lot of the channels that are the channels that I watch, is because every single time, even if they're beating a drum they've beaten maybe a year ago, it might be because someone hasn't heard that beat yet and they're not willing to look back in their catalog of years old training to dig up and find it. So sometimes it's necessary to do so. Then yeah, I'll go, let it go from there.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up some great points with all that stuff, and that's why I was so curious to ask that question. I had something. I feel like I just lost my train of thought. Damn, now we're both on this.
I mean, it's okay. So one thing I want to bring up too is like trendiness. Like
Yeah.
so for one, I feel if your fitness information can't stand without like the coattails of a trend right now, it's not information. It's just entertainment. It is purely the spectacle. There's nothing like in the heart of it, in my opinion. So, you know, like if you have to use like catchphrases and like, you know, like common memes that people kind of when they communicate and everything like that, and the social, like the internet lingo or whatever, like if you have to rely on that for your fitness information, like the moment I see that from a channel, I kind of just leave it alone. Like when it comes to like the YouTube fitness BS meter, as I call it, it's kind of like more of a filter for me personally of whether or not I watch them. And for the most part, and that's one of them. Like if it's just solely based on trends, if everything you do has to be in relation to some other trend, I'm just like, okay, you are an entertainment channel. Like you're an entertainment channel with six pack. Like that's what you are. So it's like, okay, I don't need to watch you. Clickbait channels that have any, and this is another thing, that have nothing to do with you as a lifter, with nothing to do with you as a watcher. So it's like my, like, you know, like my new house, my new girlfriend, my girlfriend cheated on me, my car broke down. It's like, and but in the name of the channel, it's something fitness, and you're just like, all right, where's this going? And then that's why it goes back to like that lack of individuality. Like YouTube fitness, in my opinion, should be a digital like form of, you know, that like, you know, like those guys you meet at the gym, you only talk to them at the gym, but they're like your brother, you know, like they, like you joke with them, you do some pretty homo shit with them, like not full homo, but you know, and there's really no homo to it, but because it's gym bro love. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. But you know, like you just joke around with these guys a lot, you fool around with these guys a lot, you train with these guys, you spot each other, you talk about certain things, and maybe every now and then you hang out with them or whatnot. But generally speaking, that's what YouTube fitness should be, in my opinion. It's that it should be a simulation of that. Like if you know a guy who basically just tells you everything that's wrong with the world, every reason why they're right, you're wrong, everything that's good in their life and why their life is the most important thing, and then they brandish themselves as a fitness channel, I'm just like, yeah, just stop watching them. Just stop watching them. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
there. Like
100%. Well, I think to continue off of that point, I just want to take a moment to ask anybody watching, have you realized how incredibly selfish vlogs are? Like it offers zero positive benefits to the viewer. And if anything, it actually offers a lot of downsides to watching the vlog. But at the same time, throughout a vlog, you're watching a person do mundane tasks. You're watching a person try and sell you supplements and clothing that you don't need, that probably all suck, especially the supplements. And then you're watching ads throughout it too. So they're just making money off of clickbaiting you into something that is just entirely selfish. And that's where it's like kind of that fine line of like motivation to, I'm trying to steal your attention and drag you away from your own lifting experience and turn it into my lifting experience so I can monetize that. And that's part of the reason why I try not to post much of my training. Like I'll post a little, I actually just do YouTube shorts for my like physique updates or whatever, like every once every 2 weeks, I'll post something just because I think it's good to kind of prove that, like, yeah, I mean, I'm not just talking the talk. I've walked the walk. I've made some progress, and by no means am I like the most jacked or the biggest or whatever. But um, I want you to see what I look like, assess what you think, and that's where you can take my knowledge and the stuff I put out and see if it's useful. Or I guess that's kind of what validates it to some people, and that's totally fair to say. But a good thought that I have a lot about these vlogs is like, we've all been to the movie theater. When you go in and you watch like an emotional movie or a horror movie or even any movie for that matter, you leave, you have these emotions throughout that movie, and you leave with these emotions and kind of a changed perception of everything. It's a vlog is like a mini version of that. You kind of see like these little things that make you think a certain way or drag you into a certain way of thinking. And you slowly start to see, like, there was one guy that I was following that just basically for years on YouTube or whatever. And he would train in a very specific way. He would talk in a very specific way about certain lifts. And then the more you consume it, the more you start to think that way. And that's what led me down the path of this dogmatic way of thinking. And then I eventually came out to it, basically came out from that as I got older and started to have more of my own lifting experience. But I was so caught up in these specific ways of lifting. And eventually I was like, whoa, I got to get out of this and just take a break. So I actually stopped lifting for 6 months entirely. And throughout that 6 months, I always knew I was going to come back. Always knew that. Obviously, I've been going for about a year consistently again now. So I have had to regain a lot of lost progress, and I still kind of am to a certain degree on certain muscle groups. But I had to kind of regain my own way of thinking. That's been really an incredible experience, because at the end of the day, this is what I wanted to get out of lifting. But in the meantime, I was trying to basically make some progress and learn some things on YouTube and on the internet. And you slowly get sucked into these vlogs and these other people's, basically their agendas and their narratives. And you start to just, the more you hear it, the more you get sucked into it. And that happened to me when I was 18 or 19 or whatever. And it took me till I was a little bit older to kind of get out of that and realize what had happened. And I'm like, not that I didn't make any progress, but it's all about the journey. And I wasn't enjoying it because I was living it through somebody else's agenda. And at the end of the day, it's all about talks like me and you are having right now, and channels that put out content like me and you do. That's why I don't try and post a whole ton of my training, because I don't want people to try and train the exact same way I do, or try and copy my physique or my style on anything. Like, I want to give you the information that you can take and do what you want to with it, or do what you think you should with it. That's what it comes down to. And I think me and you have a very similar outlook in that way. But
yeah, 100%. And then like one thing I would add on to that is like, I can relate to that, and like it actually like is like illuminating some things that happened in my own mind. Because when it came to like consuming like strength content, I feel like strength content is like, it kind of like reverses things, where like, yes, it starts to hijack like your own individuality and your own thinking. But one thing it also does is like, it also makes you doubt. And I feel like doubt is one of the like, how they say fear is the mind killer. Like, if that's from Dune, I think. Like, for me, like, it's doubt. Like, the moment you doubt yourself, it's all over. Like I don't know if you've seen Rocky 3, but you haven't.
not
All
movie.
right. All right.
I've seen 5 movies in my entire life.
Oh, okay. It's all right. I have a friend just like that. So, but yeah, like in Rocky 3, he basically says like, once a man stops believing himself, he has nothing. That's it. Like if you don't believe in who you, like, nothing matters if you don't believe in who you are. And the thing is, when it comes to like strength vlogs, is like, one thing you start to do, like, at best you just live through them, and you feel a sense of accomplishment that's unearned. At worst, you start to wonder, can I be that strong? Can I get this strong? Can I do what they do? And I definitely can relate, because there was a moment in time where like, anyone who has like really given their best foot forward in a specific sport or pursuit, like, there has been a time where you like, at least I think so, and like, this is something like I feel like a lot of people have gone through. There was a point in time where you doubted yourself, and you stopped for a certain amount of time, and that during that time was the most miserable time ever, because the only thing that you had, like for me, like, at least this is my experience, I no longer had the gym, I no longer had my drive, and all I had was my doubt. And when I was in that moment, it was like the worst thing, because I was just like, I just want to go to the gym, but like, what's the point if I can't get strong? And you know how I said earlier, like why I just don't care what another person says, why I just don't care about like another person's training method, why I just don't care about my genetics, why I don't just care about my leverages, is because I know what it's like to be in that moment where it's just like, where all you have is your doubts. I would rather be Sisyphus, lifting the boulder up a hill for the rest of my life than to just sit at home, do nothing, and not lift the damn boulder I want to lift. That's one thing I like recommend to people in life. It's like, you just have to pick your boulder. Like we are load bearers. We are meant to lift a burden. We are beasts of burden. That's what we are. We cannot live without a burden. When we watch someone else like lift their burden and think that we are helping them in some way by having that parasocial relationship, then we lose our individuality and we cease to be what we're meant to be. And that is the by far worst feeling that you can possibly have. And YouTube fitness is rife with that. And that's why I just try to stay away from that, quite honestly. Like if it's like a channel like ours, where it's just like, hey bro, this is what worked for me, what do you think about it? And then it's just like, all right, let's give it a try. Then like you just kind of do that, because that's really what training was like when YouTube fitness wasn't that big. The thing is, now we have this global gym where it's just like the biggest dude in the gym might actually be smart now and like be able to give you good information, in the same way that there's also the big doofuses in the gym who like literally only look good. And then like, but if you hear them talk, like brain cells start committing suicide. So yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that's the humor you want on your channel, but it's mine.
I'm a dry humor type of guy. I'm overly sarcastic, monotone voice, dry humor, sarcastic. So anything like that, that's like borderline kind of funny. I appreciate that 100%.
Awesome.
So yeah, do you have I do have to basically get going in a few minutes here, but I know there are a couple more topics that we didn't quite get to. So what else did you want to touch on? I want to make sure that if there's any other thoughts you have, not necessarily closing thoughts, but what's that last topic or some closing thoughts that you wanted to get through today?
I think for one, it's the defense of strength training. Because one thing, like, as I'm super happy to see that hypertrophy content on YouTube is getting so much better. There's so much better channels out right now when it comes to getting bigger than there were like 3 years ago and 5 years ago. I truly believe that. When it comes to like, I'm starting to see that, yeah, a lot of these channels from that point in time, was their literal answer was just get stronger. That was it. Like, if you get strong, you'll get bigger. And to an extent, that's true. But it's the thing is, like, the only reason why that's true is because you can't separate the two. But even though you can't separate the two, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you optimize one, you're going to get the optimal amount of the other. The biggest mistake that powerlifters and strength content has made was the promise that if you train for strength, you're going to get an equal amount of size. You just won't. That's something that's like just bad training advice overall. But the one mistake that I feel like can kind of like go the opposite direction is when people start to abandon strength overall. Because I feel like a lot of people are just like, well, hypertrophy training is changing. No, it's not that it's changing. It's just that it's becoming a bit more clear. Like let's say, for example, like I like metaphors and stuff like that. But if you took off your glasses, you probably couldn't see all that well, right?
Not at all.
Yeah, like I used to wear glasses before LASIK, but anyway, like when you're looking at something and you take off your glasses, what you're looking at doesn't change. It's just your ability to perceive it does. Like, and what your ability to perceive it and your ability to kind of have a good rational judgment of it will be based on like your knowledge prior, your knowledge at that point in time. And we're getting smarter with our training. We're getting smarter with the things that we are aware of and know about and everything like that. And we're getting better at communicating those things, but nothing is necessarily changing all that much, at least not to like a big degree. And this might be an issue that I see more often, at least, like I said, in my small part of the world. That's always a risk that kind of runs, because I don't have access to every place in the world, and every place in the world is different. But definitely when it comes down to like something that I see here is that I often hear people say like, oh, strength training is useless, machines, cables, time under tension, going like doing these really slow reps, and then like these movements are good, these movements are bad. Like
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff are all things that strength training tried to do, but it didn't work there, and it shouldn't work for size either. So whether your goal is like just pure strength, so 1 rep maxes for whatever lifts you care about, or if it's pure size, at no point in time can you ever separate the two. What, like maybe for strength training, like size is a means to an end, and then for bodybuilding, strength is a means to an end for size. But you can never separate the two. You always need to get stronger, but we need to be very clear and very careful on what we mean by strong. So
Okay. Yeah, no, I can appreciate that for sure. So the biggest thing that I want to start this off with is I do appreciate that you understand that people that were training for hypertrophy were guided in the direction of, oh, just get bigger. I mean, just get stronger and you will get bigger. And of course, the reason why that caught on is because it's true to an extent. It's just not optimal. So yeah, I mean, if you get your bench from 225 to 315, like, yeah, obviously your chest is going to get bigger. But the question is, how much bigger is it going to get compared to what you could be doing if you're training in a more optimal way? And not just that, if you're training for hypertrophy, you're not gonna care about that 315 bench. You're not gonna care about your day-to-day training. But if you're training for hypertrophy and you're trying to accumulate basically volume and you're accumulating overall mind muscle connection and tension on the muscle and all these different methods of building muscle, you're actually going to target your training a lot harder. You're going to go after it, you're going to crush it. Uh, and the difference with this is powerlifters will say to people that want to get bigger, just get stronger because you'll get bigger. Yes. But to give powerlifters or strength athletes a better perspective of what they're actually saying to people that care about hypertrophy is, what if I told you, oh, you want to get stronger? Just get bigger. So yeah, you will get stronger for sure. I got way stronger when I got bigger, but it's not optimal. So yes, I can get stronger from getting bigger, but it's not optimal. And if I told that to a powerlifter, they would laugh in my face. And it should kind of be the other way around. But since hypertrophy is more of like, I guess a minority is, and there's less of us on the platform, it's easy for us to, especially when we're young, kind of fall into that. Like if 80% of people are training for strength and they kind of make fun of, not make fun of hypertrophy training, but they don't take it seriously, then it's tough for that 20% to have a sense of kind of community and feel like they have confidence in their training. So you're just gonna be like, okay, well, 80% of people do this and a lot of them look pretty good. Let's just go in that direction. And it took it took a lot of like kind of self-evaluation to realize, okay, well, let me start thinking about this a little more. And that's basically how my channel started in the first place. But I hope you can appreciate that a little bit.
oh, 100%. And one thing I want to like add on, and this is why, like, this is something I don't know if I touched on this, like when I was talking about the pillars, but it goes back to that, like consistency, right? Part of it is enjoyment. Who can enjoy training they don't get results from? No one. So like part of the reason why like I started shifting my like training to what can be called power building is because I wanted to look a specific kind of way. But the thing is, like, when you only do squat, bench, and deadlift, and when you optimize your training for it, like anytime you're spending doing one thing, you're not spending it doing something else. So like I do like boxing and wrestling on the side. But anytime I'm boxing, I'm not bodybuilding, I'm not powerlifting, I'm not doing wrestling. Anytime that I'm wrestling, I'm not doing those other things. So no one would say, oh, you want to get better at wrestling? Do boxing. No one's going to say that. Like same thing with like, and maybe it's not 100% like equivocal between strength and size, but the spirit can still be there. But the thing is, when it comes down to like how we train and everything of that nature, you need to make sure that you're actually making progress in what you want. Like when it comes to effort, progression is part of that, because you can't separate effort from progression, because what you're doing right now might not be enough for growth later down the line. So progression is built into that, and that means results are built into that. So you can't separate, like you can't buy into a style of training that you're not getting results from. So if you are like pure size, pure strength, it doesn't really matter. Like you need to make sure that you're actually making progress into it. Otherwise, you're not going to like believe into it. You're not going to be consistent with it. It's no longer a sustainable style of training. So yeah, like just telling someone just get stronger is completely inappropriate and completely incomplete and not even that useful, quite honestly, because yes, they might get bigger, but it's like You want to get bigger biceps? Oh, just get stronger at your chin-ups. Like, might not work. Then what happens? Oh, I was consistent and I applied great effort with something that didn't provide me with results and enjoyment. Then their consistency wavers, and then they quit because they think like the only answer I was given to get big biceps was chin-ups. I did it, it didn't work. That's horrible. So like the same way with, let's say, like your deadlift, just get bigger. You do all these other things, but you don't spend enough time getting your reps in, getting your practice in with the deadlift. And then what ends up happening, you don't get any better, and boom, your consistency, it needs to have that results. It needs to have that progression built into it.
100%. I love everything you just said. I agree with you on all that. Any closing thoughts?
I really am excited for the growth of your channel because, like I said, like I really do feel that when it comes to YouTube fitness, like I've always watched those channels that, in the grand scheme of things, just had less subscribers, but generally speaking, it usually had a better quality of them, you know? So there's that. And part of a higher quality of like viewers, it means that there's a higher quality of content being given. And it's, you know, more people are giving their thoughts. We're building a community of people who are really in the trenches, like as you said, really in the mud, like of hard, difficult training and trying to really lift, like really try to like carry our load, like be beasts of burden in our given sport and profession. And I'm really excited to see more from your channel, really excited to see like the growth of it, trying to see more of like what you have like as far as information, because I am a learner. Like when I started my channel, as much as I wanted to be an expert, whatever that, like, you know, like I really, like, as I started making more and more videos, I started to realize, you know what, I don't know enough. I know what I know, but I don't know enough. And that's why I'm really grateful to be talking with you. I'm really excited to be watching your channel and learning more, because I come more so from that strength side of things and I'm never going to leave it behind. But at the same time, like I'm trying to like be a bit more knowledgeable with my hypertrophy, because hypertrophy is something that does matter to me. And I find your information very useful. And I am very grateful that you started your channel, and I hope to see it grow even more.
Damn. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I could say the same thing about you. I appreciate you having me on your channel, responding to basically my first video and kind of giving me basically that lift up off the ground. So thanks for hopping on, Karel. Really good talk. Obviously, there's going to be more of these to come. So thanks everybody for watching. And yeah, any final thoughts, or where can these people find you at?
So you can find me at Stand Strength on YouTube, and then standstrength.com. That's where I have my coaching services and my apparel. So if I try to have, I'm trying to make a very minimalistic fitness apparel brand and not be like super loud and like, you know, grungy and like have horrible designs, you know? So like, yeah, but yeah, standstrength.com, that's where you can find my coaching services. But then also Stand Strength is my YouTube channel where you can find my information. I try to have a really good balance between size and strength training, and trying to make sure people realize that when you try to train strength, it affects what you can do for size and vice versa.
Much appreciated. All right, everybody, go subscribe, go follow him, and we'll see you next time.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for having me.